This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional and other qualified health providers with any questions you may have regarding your condition. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours. Hi, Nick.
What's up, man? Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's a very special show today. It's going to be super fun. As you saw, the intro is a little bit different. Nick, what are we talking about today?
Today's our mental health episode, and
Yes.
what a good way to start it, because I think, again, we really wanted to kind of emphasize what we're talking about here is all either personal kind of experiences and things like that, but the whole goal here is to get a more open conversation with it, particularly anyone that's struggling. But we did want to put that out there to make sure you were doing it the right way.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have a psychologist here on the show a little bit later today that we got to interview, get some insight. So we have some medical professionals coming in to give you all some advice. Let us know where you're watching from in the world. It's always great to know that. And then before we get into anything, which today is going to be super dense, we have a ton of stuff to share with you, a lot of good stories. Nick, where can people get involved if they want to find a great, thriving community to be a part of?
Thrive is like the key word today.
Thrive.
Right below us, you'll see our Discord link right there.
There it is.
And
I
there it
changed
is.
it as I told you to. Sorry.
Yeah. Make sure to get in there and join in. The community is on fire. We have had such a few good weeks of really good stuff, and seeing everybody's like branding and cool stuff that they've been promoting and showing there. Neat to see you guys all sharing some great stuff there.
Yes, and we have friends, a lot of familiar faces. We have Mark Bowden, who I know is in Bermuda. Colby is in Tampa. Christelle from France. Laura, Austin, Texas. Yes, Bakersfield.
Bakersfield in the house.
And our friend Tunk in Istanbul, which if you guys haven't, Tunk is live streaming, does live streaming on his Behance, and it was super fun. I believe yesterday we were drawing a wolf, which was really fun. So go click on that little profile right there and give a follow, because there's some great live stream content that happens there outside of the Adobe Office Hours and outside of Adobe Live Hours. So hello, Shauna's here too. The whole crew's here. This is going to be a fun one.
Oh yeah.
All right, Nick, where do we want to start? This is like a big topic to tackle. It's a lot to talk about. We have a bunch of slides. Where do we want to kind of start and segue into this episode?
Gosh, I think, maybe the best thing to do is like talk about some of the personal experiences and things that we have all kind of gone through. And I think you all, anybody listening can kind of understand that there are these times where it does get tough, and we just hope to show that through sharing these ideas and looking at some really great research and hearing from great people who know this topic better than anybody. Hopefully these are the kind of the first steps to kind of get you guys comfortable with it, and talking about it should be just as normal as talking about anything else.
Absolutely. And so I think that we're going to start out talking about personal stories where we've kind of been. And so mental health is something that has a lot of stigma around it. That's something that people don't necessarily like to talk about openly, or it happens in the shadows. In this episode today, we want to kind of open that and start the conversation with Nick and I kind of sharing a little bit about our stories, specifically about being creatives or even just in life, of our mental health solutions, journeys, issues, all that fun stuff. Nick, you have a lot of experience in life, and especially being a creative. What's your journey kind of to figuring out that like mental health's important, or kind of dealing with all of that? What's that been like for you?
I say it did not, the door of that didn't open until enough other people around me, or folks that I listen to, or folks that I follow, let's say particularly on YouTube, or even just Twitter, or wherever community has been put together as far as other creatives coming together. And I remember hearing a few people talking about their worries, their hurdles, their fears, particularly like talking more about the worrying, the always worried, always thinking maybe the worst and things like that. And until I heard a few people really talking about it very vulnerably, I did not realize that what I had was considered that. Like, I always had that kind of thing of being a worrywart. Like, just, I think we were talking earlier, and I think there's things you get that trickle down from how you were raised and things like that. And I just have always had that in the back of my mind, like worry before like without the confidence. Like, you want that confidence. The more you do something, obviously, the less worrying you do. And I realized that was the formula. And if I want to worry less, or if I want to not be nervous less, the best way to do it is those little, I found my own solutions, being more prepared, taking deep breaths, breathing exercises, just chilling for a second. And then, not to mention all the stuff we're going to show you later that I think could really help you. But that was the eye opener for me, I would say, because I never described it or labeled it as anxiety. I thought that was something other people had until someone gave me a better definition of it, and it sounded a lot like what I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, man?
For me, it was, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the episode, but it was very much this like silo mentality that I thought, you know, I'm the only one that feels this way. I'm the only one dealing with these things. And so I just kind of have to deal with it. This is just the way it is. And so for me, my mental health has always been a big thing in my life. It's always been kind of at the forefront. And just about 3.5 years ago, I got diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And I thought before then that it was just like, oh, this is the way it is. This is how everyone exists in the world. I don't need help. I don't need any kind of medications. I just am going to exist like this. And then once I started reaching out and going to my medical professional, talking to my psychologist, and then getting into therapy, starting to get into those things, was like, oh, there's actually something that's happening that we can take steps to make better. And man, like once I got some diagnosis, once I got some help, I was sleeping better, like I was working through work better, like life was going better. And it was this eye-opening journey of like, man, I wish I would have talked to somebody about this earlier and got put on this path to just a better, happier life and a better kind of mental place. So it very much is something that I love that we're going to talk about today. I love that we're going to open it up. And we're kind of splitting this episode into 2 parts. So what are the sections we're going to jump into today, Nick?
Yeah, it's basically just mental health in general and the things that are a little bit more broad and a little bit like kind of like not too focused. And then we want to kind of take a little bit of a time and spend on the focus of it as a creative. Some of the research I was doing was really interesting. It was saying how what other profession, what other industry puts their work out there to be judged in the first place, right? As much as we do. And there is this tie that goes with the creative thing. And so we want to spend a little time on that as well. But one thing I really got from after when you were just mentioning your story, I think it's interesting too, that we both have the commonality is there. We didn't know until we dug a little deeper, until we asked. And taking away that barrier is really important. And one of the things that I feel pushes that barrier so firmly down and hard to jump over is the fact that everywhere you look, anyone's only posting or presenting their best world of everything. So you don't think anyone else is going through something because of that false perception. And in particularly in the creative world, right? All we talk about portfolios, logo designs, you know, what's your perception, right? What are you putting out there in the world, right? So it only makes sense that we have it just as hard or just as challenging as most.
Yep, absolutely. And we are sharing our stories, and hopefully you all will be able to share your story with someone at some point. But all of these experiences are unique. And what we have to offer you today is some advice, but it's mostly lessons that we've learned from our experiences, from our journeys, and kind of just a recap of where we've been. I think that's where I get most of my kind of mental health breakthroughs, is talking to people who are further along on a journey or have more experience in something. And it's not necessarily advice. It's just like, oh my gosh, that story totally resonates with me. That's a great thing that maybe I should apply to my life. And so I think that the transition that we'll use to kind of go into this is the idea of burnout and creative block. I think that's a really good kind of surface level to start diving into mental health, especially for creatives. I think we experience a lot of that, right? That we get burnt out and we have this creative block, and that is a mental health issue. What is it like for you, Nick, or how do you kind of see that relating to mental health?
Oh yeah, I mean, it instantly challenges what you thought you were and how good you thought you might be in your job or in your creativity, right? The minute you self-doubt, I find that I can make tons of rationale that just keeps building up on top of that. That makes it hard. Like, right? Like it's like, so maybe you are just struggling for something. And then on top of that, you're like, oh, I've never really had a good idea. And yesterday's idea that I thought was good was not that good. And then all I'm doing is this, right? And I find that like if I just walk away and take that break immediately, we have a really great quote coming up about just unplugging yourself and whatever that means to you. And when I've done that, it's made such a huge difference in my attack because I can come back and actually my great idea happens while I'm taking that break.
Yep.
So to me, that might be my best way of kind of getting past the creative hurdles and those creative blocks. What about you? What's your idea there?
Yeah, so for me, I think that it is something that it is the sneakiest mental health issue, I think, for creatives because we relate it to a work issue. We relate it to like a physical world thing instead of a mental health thing.
Yeah.
Is that I'm like, oh man, I'm so busy. I have so much work going on. Oh man, I have too many jobs. I need to sit down and just like, it's a problem of my effort, not necessarily my mental state. Where like when I get burned out, it's like, oh, my brain is tired. Like my mental zone is done.
Yeah.
Not my body or not my like creative output. It's literally just like I'm so overloaded that my brain has stopped working. And so I think that is a big mental issue that we attribute to other things. But we've said already a couple times in our intro that we're going to get to something later on. So let's hop in, let's get going, and let's jump into all these slides. We have a bunch of content for you to kind of work through, a lot of conversation. So let's hop in and really start the meat of this episode. And then in the middle, we will have a special cameo from a medical health professional friend, talk a little bit about mental health. So Nick, let's hop in and get started right here.
I think it's worth kind of bringing up what someone just kind of mentioned was this idea of having news and this hearing terrible things around them can just make you feel sick and anxiety ridden 100% right there as well. And we should think of that like when we talk maybe at the end. I'd love to hear other people's maybe solutions to that because again, outside of us as creatives, there's all that stuff going around us that can really tear us down and get into that anxiety-ridden thing where it didn't even need to be there in the first place.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. And,
so we should definitely bring that up.
And there actually is something new on the screen for those of you that are watching live. The link right over here has changed. And Nick, that link is usually Discord. What is that link now, and how are we going to leverage our community to use it?
Yeah, we thought we'd give you guys this link that's the mental resource thing for mental health. And it's a great website to go to and just have it. You never know. It's one of those things. Why not even just look at it? I think to discover that and explore is a wonderful thing.
Yep, give it a look. All right, cool. So let's hop in and talk about, let's start talking about mental health for creatives. And let's cover that section, and then we'll talk about some tips and tricks and kind of have the middle. So Nick, let's jump in. Mental health for creatives, where are we starting? Yeah,
so question for you and anybody listening. Have you ever thought your work defines you?
Yes. Yes.
When has it not, right?
Yeah, and I think that was something that was preached to me for a long time from like just design in general, is that like you are whatever your work is. Like your worth is in the amount of things that you can do, the quality you can do. And that's so toxic.
And we have every reason to believe this and make that weird connection because it's coming from you and it's a creative thing and you got your juices flowing and you were like working on something. It's like, here it is, right? But if you think about it, what your creative mind produces is separate than who you are. Always try to remember that because your creative mind is, you think about how freaking like complicated that is to actually even get an idea and put it on paper and the amount of influence and things that go into that, right? In fact, it could be pretty much opposite of you, right? It could be all the influences and the things you get from the outside world making that. A lot of times it's the brief. It's the thing that we are, as commercial artists, most of us do, is from a brief or something to persuade and do something. So that idea is so far from us. And I really think it's really great to think this way and make that detachment, because then there's no anxiety if for any reason that one idea is shot down or doesn't make it or become the real deal. Thoughts are just thoughts, not realities.
Yes.
That's really, I can't sum it up better. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with all those things. I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit more, of that idea of the thoughts just being thoughts. But yes, I agree wholeheartedly. It's so hard to separate the two. And if you're still in that zone, it's a process to separate
Yeah.
those two, because it's so ingrained. I feel like starting out as a creative, it's so ingrained that like you are your brand or you are whatever, but you're not. You're separated from that. Your work is not your value. You are your value, and your perspectives are your
Yeah.
value, and your work is just a kind of a byproduct of that.
Yep.
So moving
Yep.
right along, Nick, what's next?
So this is an interesting one, and I didn't think it really held much merit until I thought about it a little bit. And I was thinking how many times I've been worried or had anxiety because I was trying to please someone. I was trying to please. You're being that people person, people pleasing person. And here's a great example. Like, don't tell people their ideas are worth exploring when you know that they're not. Or it could be something with your situation or your creative process in school, with a job, whatever it is, or a client directly. If you stay true to yourself, you can be pleasant, but you don't compromise one, who you are, and you're not adding that extra anxiety in there because you were just catering to someone and you didn't want to maybe be truthful because you felt like it could be hurting their feelings. I think a lot of times as creatives, we're all in this kind of like, people pleasing kind of state, because that's kind of what we do. It's part of our like disclaimer, that's what we do. But in business, in the way we set up things and the way we actually create, try to think of this a little bit more. And I think it's a bigger little maybe backdoor issue that we're not thinking about too much as creatives. But what do you think? Do you see the kind of idea behind this and why just pleasing people
Absolutely.
could add more?
Yeah, so this was like my career path for like a good 3-4 years, was just people pleasing. And I should have left a job that I was at earlier, but I was trying to people please. Got into another business where I was like, okay, and then I kind of was like, oh, I'm just trying to people please, and eventually got to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to make decisions for myself. I need to be me. I need to fully embrace what I want and make a decision for myself. And I even told my partners of the business that I left, hey, I need to make this decision, and it may be the worst decision that I make in my life, but I'm making it for me, and that's enough for me to make this decision. And I actually have a banner right above that maybe you all have heard me talk about before. It's a banner right above my desk that just says "Had to be you." And so anytime I'm working or I'm in my room, I have that banner up there just as a reminder that it's more about being me than about trying to please the people around me.
Yes.
Yes, and we have someone writing in screaming, "Preach it, Nick." Yes, I agree. I agree. We're dropping truth bombs here.
I really like that one because it wasn't an immediate like but now I get where that's coming from, and I've been practicing that without even realizing that was quite an issue.
Yep.
So boy, that tells you it's very underlying.
Yeah, and I think this next point that we're going to talk about is actually a segue from that. Is that next up we're talking about, right, that it's okay to ask for help. And I think there's an aspect of thinking that you have to be a people pleaser, that somehow asking for help is not pleasing to people. When I think in a lot of situations, that's the opposite. I'm so happy when somebody asks me for help. I don't feel like they're being a burden, or I'm like, oh, you're like, ugh, you're so needy. It's like, oh my gosh, you're asking me to help you? Like, that's so endearing and trusting. And so it's not like it's affecting the people pleaser, but I think that those are tied together very closely.
I think where this one really shed the light for me was until someone came to me for some help, and it showed that vulnerability, and it showed they didn't care, that it wasn't a sign of weakness. It was just, can you offer me some advice? And I think teaching has really been the put that in the forefront for me. Now that I've seen how I respected the person who asked, I can ask just as confidently with anybody.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? So again, it's like seeing the example in someone else coming to you. You can't help but learn from that situation. Talking to someone you trust, relying on these people, and seeing that empathy, and you being the encouragement. That connection, like it says there at the bottom, could help you through the next process, and be an automatic boost by just having that person or some advice.
Yep, absolutely. I'm trying to think of what the actual quote was, but something about being able to talk to someone you trust. There's this quote and idea that's basically tell something to everyone and everything to someone, is finding those
Ooh,
people that you trust and make sure that it is a trustworthy person that you're talking to about things, and then find the group or the things that are available to everyone, because there is that idea of risk management, right? That the more you put
yes.
out there, the more vulnerable you are to be hurt, and sometimes being hurt is just a part of the process to get to where you need to go, but being careful in who you share what with, I think it's really big to have that person that you trust to be able to ask for help.
Yes. And I know a lot of people that never really got this, like, oh, figure it out yourself or blah, blah, blah. But until someone came to them and asked for that advice, again, it becomes that eye opener to even the person that is in disbelief of this.
Absolutely.
I've come across, unfortunately, I've come across a few people in my kind of like flat last few years that kind of don't believe in this thing. They're like, oh, you know, what's the thing, pull your bootstraps up and blah blah blah, or and particularly for guys too. I think it's a little bit hard to kind of get past that threshold. And thankfully, I feel like over the last few years, just seeing enough people talk about it, there's no stigma to this at all
Yep.
anymore. It's like, geez,
Yep. I
reach out.
I absolutely had someone that we were talking and kind of getting a gauge of where I was. I was not in a good place, and they were like,
Yeah,
"You just like, come on, you can do it. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps." And they use that analogy, and I remember like literally, I was like crying, and I was just like, "Dude, I don't even have boots right now. Like,
yeah,
I'm literally standing here in my socks. Like,
yeah.
I've got nothing to go on." And so I love having those people that you can ask for help and have those real conversations with.
Oh yeah.
And so going out of that, right, I think that there are those times that you're like, oh, I trust someone, but then you go in this mindset of like, hey, I'm like this failure and I need help to like get better. But I think that there's a different way to reframe that. What's the different way to
Yes.
reframe that?
Yeah, failure kind of equals success. Like this, I
Sort
love these
of.
two lines, right? Outcomes of most failures are mostly a positive.
Yep.
Let's just face it. I mean, it's that whole thing about if it's a dip, there's only one way to go from a lot of these things. Failure is much more successful way to learn than merely succeeding every time. Think of that. Like, yeah, if you were just, again, it goes to perception of people you follow or see, or the what people put out in the world. It's just triumph after triumph after triumph, no pitfalls, right? And who's learning in that situation? I can go back to when putting work out there and it being a make or break for the company I was working for. I remember like literally doing campaigns and like, if we didn't land this thing, like, will we continue? And I remember losing one, and the way we came back together and took that failure and turned it into a success, it wasn't for bragging rights. It wasn't for continued employment. It was just pride. It was like, we gotta do better. And we found formulas and we found ways and we found processes to be better, because that failure, as much as it hurt, it was the exact kick in the butt that you needed.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Any experiences for you?
uh,
You're
kind
like,
of. I I was
sit down for a while.
I was thinking of the segue into where we were going, and so I was like gonna jump in with a completely other thought. So I agree with all the things that you said, and
Yes.
I have already moved on to a different thought. So
No,
yes,
no worries. All
yes,
right,
what
let's
you
do
said.
it.
Nick, listen to what Nick said. So I was thinking, moving into where we're going. Right, we're gonna talk about reframing, and I was just thinking how
Yeah.
we started that question talking about reframing, and I'm going to talk more about reframing coming up later on. Let's talk about what that is. What is the idea of reframing to you, Nick?
This was probably the first advice I think I've ever got from someone that was anywhere in this zone of anxieties and mental health and everything. It was like, if you don't like the way you're feeling, change the way you're feeling. Do like literally reframe your mood, and that's the first step. So act how you want to feel. So sometimes reframing can really change that mood, turn yourself into something incredibly powerful. This is particularly helpful when doing presentations or public speaking. Every time I had to do one, I remember going, okay, the last time I did one, when I was up there, once I got past it, I was pretty good. Like all the butterflies went away. There was a great connection. I was looking at the audience. I wasn't rushing or speeding. So I said to myself, before the next one, just put yourself in that mindset, right? Put yourself right there at the beginning. How did you feel when you were done and accomplished and you did good? So just try to take those experiences. They fill the void that you've just taken the fear out of, and now you have a better chance of kind of moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. And I think we're going to talk about this later, but a quote to take away that I got from someone was basically this idea of nothing has to be in any way. I always thought that was just like the greatest short little thing to remember, is that if you get stuck and you feel like, oh, it has to be this way, or, this is happening all around me, that you can, again, act how you want to feel. Nothing has to be in any way. It doesn't have to be like that. Let's act like it's not, and then see what happens. And then sometimes reframing is really, really great and really helpful for that kind of stuff. All right, so we've got a couple more here in creatives, and I think that this one applies both to everyday life as well as being a creative. Let's talk about some similarities between excitement and anxiety, Nick. How do they relate?
This explains me to a T, because I'd say 90% of anything I would claim is anxiety is just excitement.
Yes.
It really is, because I remember the first time even going on Adobe Live, I was beyond anxiety ridden. I was ready to bolt out of that room so fast. But then I realized all it was just excitement. It really was. It was like you just kind of go back to that other slide, right? Like put yourself in a mindset you want to be, get a little bit more happy, a little less depressed, get into that zone where you're smiling. Isn't there that great line that's just like, you can't be mad if you're smiling, just physically smiling, right? Yep. So anxiety and both excitement really produce pretty much the same neurological responses in the brain.
Yep, and it's
the same thing.
We just had someone write in. My therapist says if you're feeling down, take a moment to make yourself smile, even though you're not feeling it. The physical act of smiling could help you actually feel at least a little bit better. I totally agree.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. This line could be my favorite line in this whole presentation. Think of nervousness as a thrill rather than a threat. Ooh. And I think, again, that puts you you've already changed your mindset, right? You're thinking of it as a thrill. So it's a roller coaster ride. It's something you're going to have the time of your life with. And if you could change that around, again, look back at any other time you have been nervous. It was probably something that you hopefully did great at, or maybe you didn't, but you got better at it, the next time. It's all excitement.
Absolutely.
I love that analogy.
Yep. And jumping in further, this is something that we talked about at the beginning of the episode that we kind of want to talk about again, and that is us sharing our stories, us giving you advice, of trying to be as open as we can about our journeys, because there is a little bit of a stigma. Nick, what are we talking about for vulnerability?
Yeah. Oh, be free. To be vulnerable, be free. I mean, this is such a great trait to see in someone. Again, going back to what we said at the very beginning, until I saw it in others, I didn't understand this. And you think you have to be so strong and so capable and can't show a weakness. But again, the minute someone shows it to you, you turn to a whole other state, right? You're like, how can I help? What can I do? Wow. What you just admitted that. That's the kind of stuff that if we get better with it, imagine how great that is in our circle and the people that we are around. Yes. So freely admitting to fear, anxiety, and lack of confidence too. I love it when someone says oh, have you ever heard of that great designer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, haven't. I'll willingly say I have not, or some principle in design, because I'm a teacher. I should know that. I will so freely say, no, I do not. Tell me more. Because wouldn't you rather that if you ask that question to someone, you don't want someone to fake it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Same thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
I love that. And I think this is something, just exercising this more recently than ever, because I think ego and certain other things can really take over on this, and you don't want to, I remember reading a book all about the ego, and it doesn't want you to fail. It doesn't want you to show signs of weakness.
Yep.
And I don't think that's the way to go.
Oh, last week, and again, this is being freely vulnerable. Last week was the worst week that I've had in years. And Nick and I got on our prep call to record the promo, and I was like, hey, so like there's just no way that this episode's going to happen with mine. Like it's just not. And so Nick helped to like take over a lot of the slides, to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And if I hadn't been vulnerable to that, and if he hadn't been receptive to helping me out with that, like we both would have suffered the consequences, right? I would have been way stressed, and then it would have just turned out in like a crappy episode. And instead, he was able to jump in, help me. I was able to get a little bit more of a mental zone that was good and healthy for me, and then to come to the episode and be able to give that great episode to all of you. And so it was that all across the board, everyone wins when you have that vulnerability, but also when you have the receptiveness to someone else having that vulnerability. It's a total two-way street there.
It really is. What do you think of this question? Do you think that well-mannered people are the most vulnerable? By well-mannered, I guess you're saying nicest, sincere, maybe, like trying to. What do you think? I don't.
Going on the vulnerable, I don't know. I don't know if there's a correlation between those two. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
I guess you're saying like because they might be well-mannered, polite, whatever, they have more likeliness to be vulnerable. I've seen people who are completely opposite, and something breaks, and then they're instantly vulnerable because there's no other way to go. Like, do you know what I mean? So I don't really think you can market to one particular kind of person, but I think more importantly, just think of it on an individual level and how many times you haven't been, and what a dishonest conversation that might have been afterward.
Totally. Yep. And jumping forward into maybe some takeaways. These are the tweetable quotes, things to kind of sum up what we have been talking about. Nick, what's our first one that I think correlates a lot with what we were just talking about?
Life is 10% what you experience and 90% how you respond to it. And again, this to me is the first lesson I think I've ever learned in this thing, where it's all about how you respond to it. That's what makes you, I think that's how you get over the hurdle of anything being negative or bad, but also it puts you're putting yourself in control when you need to, and how you respond to it. Again, I think that is 90% of what life is. That's that 10% where you react knee jerk, change it.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. It is a lot of reaction time as you kind of, we say roll with the punches. They come with you, right? That 10% of that is the punches actually coming toward you, and 90% of that is learning how to move and dodge and kind of move around those. So
second, take the next one?
Yeah, it's from Deepak Chopra. And every time you are tempted to react in the same old way, ask if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future. I'm going to talk about this idea more when I get into my points.
That's a t-shirt right there, man.
Yes.
Love that one.
Yes. That's a good one. We're going to boil this down to a very fun quotable idea once we get a little bit further in there. But yes, not dwelling too much on the past. And Nick, another quote for us to cover. What do you got?
Yeah. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including yourself. And I do that with everything that is on this desktop on a weekly basis, right?
Yes.
Just unplug it, let it rest for a second. And it's a machine, right? We should be doing the same thing. So try to take that advice. It works every time.
Yep, absolutely. My go-to, and y'all have heard me probably say it before, is that like I laid on the floor at some point. There's something about like touching the ground that makes me feel grounded. And so if I need that moment to like unplug, I'll literally lay on the ground and just like be on my phone, or like lay there and listen to a song. And it's something about being on the ground and not my bed, not a couch. Like I need to be on the ground is kind of my mental unplug.
Wow.
All right, so we have a very special guest this episode.
Yes.
This was an interview that was recorded in the past, so if there's volume changes, anything that is different, it's because we're transitioning to a pre-recorded interview with our friend Nima Moayedi, and he'll do his intro, but he's a medical professional, and we asked about some advice about what mental health is, why it's important, and all that fun stuff. So let's pop over there and say hi to Nima. Thanks, Future. General question to get us started. Thanks, Teacher Andrew, for that intro. Hello, past Andrew here with a friend, Nima Moayedi. Hi, hello, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing great. Nima, can you intro yourself? Tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you're on this episode.
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I also work as a forensic psychologist.
Thanks, Teacher Andrew, for that intro. Hello, past Andrew here with a friend, Nima Moayedi. Hi, hello, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing great. Nima, can you intro yourself? Tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you're on this episode.
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I also work as a forensic psychologist. Grew up in Southern California, did my training here, did my programs here, and I have an office in Laguna Hills, and I've been doing this since 2013.
Oh, so you are long on the trail of mental health in general, just being in that zone and being a professional in it, which is why we brought you on the show today. So, general question to get us started. Why is mental health important? Why mental health?
Mental health is a part of our health. So physical health and mental health go side by side. If our mental health isn't up to par, and if we're not doing well with dealing with our day-to-day struggles, every aspect of our life, from our mood to our sleep, our diet, is going to be affected in a negative way.
Which is interesting for us as creatives, for a lot of our audience, is that then cascades into our work, into our creativity, which then circles back into our mental health not being great because our creativity is down. And so it becomes this cyclical cycle. And it's interesting to hear you that it's all one thing. It functions as a whole. So talking through more mental health, right? For us, it's something that's hard to break. A lot of times it's something that kind of gets pushed to the side. Do you think that it always should be a priority? Do you think it's something that is a priority here and there? Is it a constant thing? Can you segment it? What does it look like to kind of manage that on a day-to-day?
This is a really good question. Taking care of your mental health should really be not like a diet, but a lifestyle. If you're living a healthy lifestyle, physically and mentally, the chances of thriving go up significantly. And that is really the goal. We want to be influential in the things that we do. We want to be impactful in the things that we do. We want to be directed, and we want to have an understanding that what we're doing is what we want to be doing. If we don't take care of our mental health, this is impossible. So when it comes to working through, if it's upkeep, then yes, because early intervention is always key. The sooner you intervene, the better the outcome is going to be. The less of an intervention you need to have.
All right. So transitioning out of what you just said about kind of it being a day-to-day task, something we have to maintain. There's a lot of people that kind of have a stigma around mental health, right? It's something that they don't want to talk about, that feels like they can push it off. And I think that it's kind of been pushed to the forefront again with the Simone Biles situation that's happening. But again, it's polarizing there, right? There are people that super support it, and then there are people that are on the side of just power through, just do it. What advice would you have to someone that is on the fence, that feels like maybe it's not important, maybe I don't want to talk about it, wants to start to reach out, go to therapy? What would you say to that person who's not sure what to do with their mental health?
It can't hurt to give it a try. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But if it's something that you try and you do find value from it, then you're better off than you were before you even gave it a shot. Think of it like this. When you go to treatment, when you go to therapy, when you see a professional, all you're really doing is you're adding tools to your toolbox to be able to cope with the daily life stressors that you're going to have. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what privileges you've been given or what adversities you need to overcome. Everybody has stressors. Everybody has things that they have to deal with. And if everybody has these things that they have to deal with or cope with or to move through, wouldn't it be better to have more useful skill sets? I mean, we go to a gym to exercise, to use the machinery there. Why not use the same thing or the same premise for our mind? If our mind isn't kept up to point, every aspect of our life is going to suffer. Why not do ourselves that favor? At the very least, give it a shot.
Yep. And you guys have heard me say this before, this idea of don't give up what you want for what you want now. It's something that is that long journey. It's something that you can just start. And even though it may be stigmatized, even though you may want to feel comfortable, you may not want to speak out, what you really want is, like you've said, to thrive, right? And so that long-term goal can overcome what you feel in the moment to kind of push through. So with that, we like to give our audience homework, something to do over the next week. What is one thing that we can do to work on our mental health in the next week?
Do some research.
Ooh.
Look up a little bit about something called cognitive behavioral therapy. That could be a great first step.
Sweet. And we will link in the show notes, or we'll put it in our Discord for you all to get some resources for there. Maybe we'll just link you to a Google. We'll find a nice page for you to get some information on that, and we'll link it in the Discord. Make sure that you follow. I think it will be down below me, or it'll be over here, or I'll just throw it up on the screen. So thanks so much for joining us today, Nima. Have a great day, and hopefully you thrive in the future. Talk to you later.
You too.
Bye.
Take care, Andrew.
So that was our friend Nima. And again, the theme of today, I guess, is thriving. I didn't realize that I talked that much about thriving in the interview, but we did. And that link that we just talked about is not below us right now. Let me move some things around to make sure that it is below us. There we go, right there. So over here, mentalhealth.gov, that's the place that we want to send you. That's the place that we want you to get information, get logged in, get connected. And like Nima said, research the term cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, a lot of people putting CBT in the chat. It is great. Do some research and educate yourselves on that.
Nice.
Nick, we're going to hop into some tips and tricks. And we
let's
do
take it, man.
Have about, 10 minutes, 13 minutes left. So we're going to go pretty much until we get cut off today, because we got plenty of stuff for y'all.
Go for it, man.
So
tell us about the first tip and trick.
Here's one that Nick's talked about a little bit, is that perception is reality. And what that means is the way that you experience the world around you is the world around you, right? To me, if I'm looking at something and it is blue, it is blue. If I feel something and it feels cold, it is cold. Even if my body is reacting differently than someone else's was, to me, my perception of that thing is my reality. And so if you can start to shift your perspective, you can start to shift your reality, right? So you don't have to necessarily go after shifting reality and trying to fix all of these things and try to make everything work and control all the stuff. Sometimes being able to control your perspective will shift those things in turn.
Exactly.
All right. And a lot of these that we're jumping into here are not necessarily creatives, not necessarily thought. It's more just things that have been from my experiences, doing therapy, kind of going through my mental health journey. These are lessons that I've learned to pass along down to you. And so this is something that I like to do, and this is a practice. Nick, do you ever spiral into a zone where you have like this shower fight with someone that like doesn't exist, that like the conversation didn't happen and you're in the shower and you're just like, yeah, so they'd say this and then I would say this and then because of that, then this would happen. Do you ever like get into that zone?
I love it. Is there a name for that? Like, cause like I think you described it perfectly.
Yes,
like,
I always
have that at a certain point.
Yeah, I always just call it a shower fight.
Your mind can play some weird tricks.
Yes, exactly. And so what my mind tends to do is lump everything together. I have a really hard time sorting things out. And so to me, A plus B sometimes equals Y, right? There's no C. It just like jumps all the way to Y. And it's like, wait, well, there are all these things in between. And so a practice that I've adopted from a therapist that I had in the past is this idea of what is true up until now. And this is such a helpful exercise that I absolutely love. And it's just walking through the facts and trying to separate them from feelings. And so wherever you are, if you're in like this high zone of completely freaking out and all these things are happening and because of this and this and this, just try to have a moment and say, okay, what's true up until now? And start small. I'm sitting at a desk. I'm currently in an episode of Office Hours. I'm in my
Yes.
bedroom. I'm having fun with this episode. We have a few more slides left. I'm a little bit stressed about getting everything done by the end, right? And that way I'm starting to say, okay, cool. Well, I have a lot of slides left. I'm having fun. So even if we don't get to the end, that's fine, right? Then I'm starting to separate what my feelings are of being nervous about finishing this episode from the reality of like, we have slides and it'll be fine. We'll put them in Discord. And so
that.
ask yourself, what is true up until now? Next out. It's not about right or wrong. It's just different. Nick, you've said this a few times as we've kind of talked about. We've been, I think, pretty careful to not say that like there is an issue or the way that you're thinking about something is wrong. It's kind of addressing in a different way. I've heard someone talk, and I think we talked about this in a past episode, of the idea of designing with one Pantone color, right? If you're working with one color, it'd be boring, but if you work with a bunch, then it becomes interesting, and each one is unique in its own way. Right?
I think this is so true. It's kind of like different is the best way to describe it, rather than saying it. Typically you're probably going to be wanting to say it's wrong because you are obviously right. You know what I mean? And so this idea, I think, is where some of the best creative comes out of.
Yes.
It's that person that can think this way and do these things. So it's almost taking what we thought was a negative in a lot of ways and turning it into a positive in our careers and what we express. You know, there's so many different ways to look at that.
Yes. And like it says here, you aren't less than or better than because of your mental health situation. We're all different and unique, and those uniquenesses are essential. I was talking with Amy and Jen Hood, and we were talking about kind of our mental health journeys. I was sharing that I have bipolar 2, and it was an interesting conversation because I realized that the uniqueness in that is not that there's something wrong with me, that it is, that sometimes gives me the ability to feel emotions or feelings more intensely or more deeply than most other people. And most of the times that tends to be hard or a struggle. And then sometimes that's a really great thing. I'll get ideas. I'll be able to express myself in a way that wouldn't necessarily be super accessible to other people. And so I love that part of my mental health, even though it is a struggle sometimes. It is nice to say, hey, this is me. It's unique. And I think that there is an essentialness that exists in there.
And you, as the listener on maybe that side of the situation, hears it more as an alternative rather than automatically being wrong.
Yes.
And I think that's so not only should you be presenting this thing, but we should be more open to hearing it when someone addresses it that way.
Absolutely.
Next one.
So we've talked a lot about like, do great things. You're going to do it. Things are going to be awesome. This is one that has been one of my biggest takeaways. There's power in affirming sometimes stuff just sucks. Like sometimes there's no, like, we can work through this. Like, I'll be with you there.
Spin.
Dude, no spin. Like being able to sit down with someone and be like, that sucks. End of conversation. Then like it's 20 minutes of silence and like drinking. Like that's like Nick and I are at lunch. We've got our beers and it's like, cool. Hey, this is happening. Nick says that sucks. And then it's just quiet and like our drinks are done by the end of us talking.
On to the next.
Like that's it. Yeah. Sometimes it just sucks. Even rainbows fade is the thing that I like to remember, right? Sometimes things are great and glorious and then eventually it's not raining anymore and the rainbow goes away. So sometimes
why suffer over this any longer than it needs to be?
Yes.
Like I love when I can look at a comp that I'm putting together and absolutely know it's going nowhere. Typically, I would work on that thing for 2 hours. Now I'm like, delete it. Get it, literally delete the file, start from scratch.
Yes.
You gotta admit these things.
Yes. Yeah. I love the creative journey of like, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. And then you hit a zone where you're like, this sucks. And then you just delete it. And it's not like I'm doubting myself. It's like, cool, let's have some vulnerability. Let's have the reality that this sucks and let's move on. I don't need to try to save this here.
Here's the thing, link it to the slide before that. It's not that it sucks. It was just wrong for whatever you were particularly putting together.
Yes.
Accept it, move on.
Yes, it was different. It was different. And in the process, it was essential for you to get to where you're going.
Love it. Love it.
All right. And then here's the one that I talked about a little bit earlier in the episode, is that nothing has to be in any way. I just love that phrase. And don't ever feel like you should or have to explore what you could or maybe. It's the idea of changing I can't to can I, right? That statement that's definitive to an open question. And that question is yourself. It challenges you and it also opens you up to new possibilities. Because sometimes things can change if you don't decide that they can't.
Yeah, That's very true.
Yes. And this is the one that we talked a little bit about. Nick, you mentioned, what was your point about kind of moving through to the future?
Oh, basically you got me there.
I know.
Was like, what's the bridge?
I know.
It could be so many things.
Yes, I kind of remembered it, but it was we talked a little bit about this idea of not being trapped in the past and dwelling on it, but being able to like move into the future. And the phrase that someone has told me that I think is one of the greatest things, and they didn't even give me the whole phrase here; they just gave me the end, so I'll read it to you.
I love it.
Your past influences your future, but you aren't a museum. I was talking to someone, and we were kind of like talking through something, and there's this moment of pause, and I was kind of just unpacking all this stuff that had happened, and like all these years of trauma and whatever, and they just stopped and they're like, dude, you're not a museum. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, you're being like totally defined by the past, and that's all that's relevant in your situation, but like you're not focused on anything in the future. And I was like, bye.
That's a golden rule right there.
Right?
That is crazy.
Right?
Because you think about it now, isn't your portfolio basically
a museum?
Your museum? Like, so the idea of the freshness, the idea of always changing, the idea of having something front of line is that at least there's movement and there's a flow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Being more, because again, all of that stuff will make your future.
Yep, absolutely. And this is I know this is one of the things. So I'm really bad about like booing my therapists. Like if they say something that's too relevant to me, like in this session, I'll just be like, boo. And that's how they know that they
means you hit a nerve.
That's how they know they hit it. Yeah. So this one was great. I just love that phrase of like, you're not a museum, move on, focus on the future.
Yes.
And a couple more here. This is one that I've had to struggle with. It's been really tough. Through, not over, right? You hear a lot of people saying, hey, get over it. It's much better to work through something than to get over it, right? Forge your path. It's maybe going to hurt and maybe be hard, but push through something, because if you get over it, that thing is still going to exist and you might get trapped back up in it in the future.
True. Yeah. I mean, you didn't solve anything.
You didn't solve anything. You just jumped over it, right? It's like
you just jumped over.
Yeah, playing a video. It's like playing Super Mario World and getting both of the whistles and jumping to the 8th world, and then you get there and you're like, there's all these crazy things. And you're like, if you would have played the whole game, like you would have been able to be ready for this.
Exactly.
All right, and here's our last one. Question mark? Yes, answer. This is our last one. Seek out help and take their advice. This is something that's so important, and Nick talked about it earlier. Reach out to a psychologist, to a therapist. If you have any kind of healthcare, usually there are great resources. My healthcare has great resources for that. I just sent one email out that said, hey, these things are happening. I'm feeling a little weird, having trouble with stuff. How can I get started? And now I'm 2.5 years with a great therapist, awesome care doctors, action plan, medications, all that. And it all was just from a quick email. So reach out if you need to take advice. And then, Nick, what's the next step? This is an important one.
You got to take your meds.
Yes.
You got to do the work.
Yes.
You got to do whatever was given to you to actually make the work happen.
Yes.
Right? Keep going with it. I think that's the number one important thing here.
Yes, absolutely. And I think something when we're talking about stigmas, I think that there is a stigma around the idea of medication. So when I initially got diagnosed, there was a lot, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to take anything. Like that makes me like somehow less than, or like, oh, it just like feels weird. And so then I started taking medication, and like things started to get so much better. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I had put this stigma on myself, or someone had put it on me. And it's been something that I'm like, oh, this is a part of the plan. This is a part of the work that I have to do, right? Yeah. And even at the beginning, there was this moments and times of like hiding my pills in my luggage and like whatever. So I'm like, oh, I don't want people to find out. And now it's something that I'm like, oh man, I wish we would talk about, because it's been so helpful, and it's been something that's been a big part of my mental health journey. I have them here on my desk. This is, there we go. I take 250 milligrams of lamotrigine, and it's great every day. It's something that helps me along with therapy, along with talking to other people, to do that work. And you can't have the reward if you don't take the journey. And so a lot of that is, here's the journey, here's the path that you are going to take from that therapist or psychologist. You have to take that journey, and then you get into wherever you're trying to work to a better place in life.
Yeah. Let's just face it. The doctor told us it can't hurt to try.
Yes.
You've got to at least try it. You're better off either way.
Yep.
Because you've gone through something to find out if it's going to work.
And absolutely. Last point, Nick, what do we have to do?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Just keep going. This is the road we're on. I think too, the more you get wins with every little thing like this, those become those things you can chalk up, and they become that back pocket support that I think everybody's looking for.
Yes.
You know, that's how I can ever say anything successful has happened.
Yes, absolutely. So we literally hit the last slide
Boom.
at the last minute. So we did it. This was a perfect episode structure. We did it, y'all. We made it through. Chat was going crazy this entire time. So thank you so much all for participating.
Keep the conversation alive on Discord.
Yes,
go for it.
Go
We'll
over to
chime in
Discord.
for sure.
Right down below, join the Discord, bit.ly/OH cabin chat. You can post in there in the summer camp channel over in the side. Post your thoughts, post any feedback, anything you're processing through after this episode. And next week we'll be back with some Illustrator and Fresco fun. And we'll be kind of just having fun and showing you how you can use creativity to better your mental health. So we're going to keep it on mental health for the next week or so. And then 2 weeks, Nick, before we get cut off, what do we have coming up in 2 weeks? We have a very, very, very special thing that we're announcing right now.
Is that our Jen and Amy Hood special spectacular?
Yes. We're having Jen and Amy Hood on the show in a couple weeks. So we'll remind you all when that's coming up. But Amy and Jen Hood of Chutzpah Design are coming on, and we're going to be talking about business, y'all. So it's going to be business time, and we will see you then for another episode of Adobe Office Hours. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.